Hello, I'm Eric Hammond with Colorado State University Extension, and this is the fifth and final module in our discussion about soil biology and ecology, and we're going to be discussing symbiotic soil microbes. So, for those who aren't aware, a symbiotic relationship between two organisms is one in which both benefit from their association. There are several different species of microbes that form these sort of relationships with plants. Generally, these relationships work along the lines of the plant gives carbohydrates, i.e. energy, to the microbes, which they're very good at creating from photosynthesis. And in return, they receive resources from the microbes that would be otherwise difficult for them to get. So it could be increased water uptake, increased nutrient uptake, or etc. The two main types of microbes which form symbiotic relationships are rhizobia and mycorrhizae, although there are others, and we're learning more about this all the time. So let's start by talking about rhizobia. Rhizobia are bacteria which form symbiotic relationships with the legume family. So that includes the beans, peas, as well as many other plants. In this relationship, the bacteria colonize the roots of the plants and form these nodules, which you see in the picture here on the screen. These bacteria are capable of fixing atmospheric nitrogen, so nitrogen in the gaseous form that it's in the atmosphere, into a mineral form that can be used by them and by the plant. In exchange, the plant provides the bacteria with sugar, so energy. On the other hand, mycorrhizae are fungi which form symbiotic relationships with a wide variety of plants. In fact, over 80% of terrestrial plants are known to form relationships with mycorrhizal fungi. In the relationship that mycorrhizae form with plants, they again receive carbohydrates from the plant, and in return, instead of giving the plant nitrogen, they give the plant increased access to water and some nutrients. The hyphae of mycorrhizal fungi are small enough that they can access water that is too tightly held in the soil for plants to absorb on their own. They're also capable of mineralizing nutrients which are hard for plants to take up, such as phosphorus and others. There are a couple different types of mycorrhizae. The main difference between the two is that one, known as the ectomycorrhiza, don't actually penetrate the cells of their host plants. They just grow along the surface of roots and between the cells. The other type, most commonly referred to as arbuscular mycorrhizae, actually penetrate the cell walls of their host plants and form structures within them. So mycorrhizae greatly extend the reach of plants' root systems. Here you can see pine roots, both with and without mycorrhiza. This is part of the reason they enable the plant to absorb more water and nutrients. Mycorrhizae also have other side benefits. For example, they exude a sticky compound, a sticky protein known as glomalin, which is a very long-lasting glue which is involved in the creation of soil structure. So again, it helps soil particles bind together to form that hierarchy of structures that allows for both large and small pore spaces to help soils both hold water and have larger pore spaces which are occupied by air. This is a bunch of benefits to plants which we've talked about earlier. Mycorrhizae are naturally found in many soils, and there are many different species of mycorrhizae. Some of them are very host specific. They will only colonize specific species or group of species. For example, some species of mycorrhizae will only colonize pines or things like that. Others are generalists and they'll colonize a wide variety of plant species. In general, mycorrhizal fungi are favored by the same good soil conditions that favor plant growth. So the presence of organic matter, a moist soil that contains water but also has larger pore spaces that will be filled with air. And if the soil is capable of supporting them, there's a good chance they already are active in the soil. There are some things that limit the relationship between mycorrhizae and plants. One big limiting thing can be phosphorus levels in the soil. If they're above about 100 parts per million, there is limited or no colonization of plant roots by mycorrhizae. In many western soils, phosphorus levels are naturally above 100 parts per million, so that's worth keeping in mind. Because these symbiotic relationships do such good things for plants, one of the questions that always gets asked is, can I add these symbiotic organisms to my soil to increase the amount of benefit I'm getting from them? For rhizobia, the answer to that question is that adding them with the first planting of any species of legume in a new garden will probably be beneficial. You may get increased yield, etc., but you probably only need to do it at the first planting. For mycorrhizae, it's a little more complicated. There are many products available that contain spores of mycorrhizae, but there's not a lot of good evidence that these products have much benefit when used in landscape soils. In a nursery setting where we're growing in a soilless potting media that maybe started out as sterile, that's a different story. But in a landscape setting, in soil, there's not much evidence that adding mycorrhizae will have any benefit to the plant in terms of growth or yield or anything like that. So the question is, why not? Why is there not a research study that shows a good correlation between adding these inoculants and better plant growth or yield? And there are a couple theories as to why there might not be. So one theory is that the conditions in urban soils and landscape soils may not be favorable to mycorrhizae. Landscape soils often are very low in organic matter and are often very compacted, and so they have low soil oxygen, which are conditions that do not favor the mycorrhizae. Also, phosphorus levels may be high, and if they are, that discourages colonization. It may also be that the product that you buy is just not viable. The spores are produced through a number of methods, some of which are very complicated, but they're oftentimes shipped via standard shipping, where it gets hot, cold. They may then sit on the shelf for a long time, so the product just may not be viable by the time you add it. It could also be that the water and nutrients that the mycorrhizae assist in absorbing are already abundant in urban soils. We water urban soils and we oftentimes fertilize them, and this gives the plant very little incentive to engage in the symbiotic relationship. It's already getting plenty of the nutrients. Why would it want to share the carbohydrates it creates? It could also be that they're already present. If the mycorrhizae are already present in the soil, we wouldn't get a discernible difference by adding any. And mycorrhizae are present in many soils where conditions are good. It's also possible that the product that you apply may not contain organisms which are compatible with the plant that you are trying to grow. They're not a mycorrhizae that forms a relationship with that specific plant. So generally we don't recommend inoculating with mycorrhizae. If you're doing it, you're certainly not causing any harm, but again, there's just no research to show that there's going to be a definite benefit. All right, the rest of our talk on symbiotic microbes. It's a very complicated topic, and we just kind of brushed the surface of it here in the talk. This also wraps up the bit of the course which revolves around soil biology and ecology. And so on this slide, there's just a few key points to remind you of some of the important points of this topic for gardeners. So just remember, soil life does a lot of good things for us as gardeners, and we want to encourage it. And the best way to encourage it is to add organic matter, which is the basis of the soil ecology. Without it, the soil ecology looks very different. Our goal as gardeners is to, for most types of plants, again, not all types of plants, but is to have about 5% organic matter in the soil. There are some plants that are evolved to grow in much harsher soils, but for many plants, we want to grow 5% organic matter is our goal. In a landscape setting, the best way to encourage soil health is to, again, add organic matter, encourage the soil to be well aerated and thus well drained, and the same good conditions which favor plant growth also favor a healthy soil ecology. So it's kind of a build it and they will come, build it and soil microbes will be there situation. If you have any questions about this section, make sure to ask in the discussion. Thanks.